We're doing therapy this morning.
Yeah, we
That's
are.
good. You guys are parking therapy.
Yeah.
Uh, Karen, are we ready to go? Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. We have first order of business is the roll call, and then well, let's start with that.
Governor,
Here.
Attorney General,
Here.
Commissioner.
Here. I'd like to invite everyone as a tradition to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one order of business related to administrative, related to the renewable energy standard and the newly created carbon-free standard in Minnesota, which of course is there's a comment period which could lead to potential litigation, but Karen has an action item for us to consider this morning.
Yes, thank you, Governor. So at our last meeting, you approved the comment letter to be submitted to the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. Legal counsel contacted me yesterday and just asked that we seek authorization for them to reply to any comments that get submitted that specifically identify North Dakota or would be relevant to us. So they're just seeking authority to make that reply if needed, as necessary and appropriate. And those replies would have to be submitted by July 10th.
Hmm.
So if so inclined, if you could approve that today, and that would position them to take that action if needed.
That's a reasonable request. I move it.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. And a question, Karen, this is on top of, because I believe at our last meeting, we approved as a commission the comment letter itself, which I think had a June 30th
Correct.
deadline.
Yep.
So that's been sent, but now if there's a reply to that, we want to give our team the ability to get the deadline and reply, which is basically over the holiday weekend.
Right, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
Will it be, I'm sorry to interrupt, Gov, will there be an opportunity for us to review what, any of those same comments? Will they plan to forward that to us?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
the replies would be, the
Yeah.
responses would be circulated
Yeah.
and then signatures collected and then submitted by that deadline. It's a very tight turnaround, and they're not seeing anything yet that would
Okay.
warrant it, but they just want to be prepared.
Yeah.
Good questions, Ron. We'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor,
Yes, motion carries. Our other order of business today is the finalist interviews for the Bank of North Dakota President role, important role in the state of North Dakota. We are fortunate that we have two strong finalists. The first of those finalists is with us today, and want to congratulate Kelvin Hewitt for being one of those finalists, and thanks for joining us. Since we're not able to meet as a group in preparation, I'll just recap what's happened. Each of us designated a representative. Karen, maybe you can describe a little bit of who else is on that committee and how we got to our two finalists.
okay. Thank you, Governor. So each of the commission members designated a representative on the search committee. So for the governor, Lieutenant Governor Tammy Miller. For the Attorney General, it was Deputy Attorney General Claire Ness, Chief Deputy Attorney General Claire Ness, and then the Deputy Ag Commissioner Tom Bodine. We also had two members from the Bank's Advisory Board, Carl Bolenberg, who serves as the chair of the advisory board, and Brenda Foster. Other participants, non-voting, myself, Lori Langang, who's the Chief Administrative Officer at the bank, and Jay Spieler as well.
And how many applicants did we have to this process?
We had 132 applicants. It was a very lengthy, robust, thorough search process. We had exceptional support from the search firm that was hired to assist us, and through the process of screening interviews and video interviews, we now reach the final stage with
Great.
two exceptional candidates.
Great. Well, thanks for that update on the search committee. It's great that we had such strong interest locally and nationally for this role, and great that we're at this point. For my fellow commissioners, There is and has been distributed ahead of time some suggested questions. Those are just guidelines for you. We should, as we've done in the past, when interviewing candidates in public, we can start with this framework, but with candidates have different backgrounds, can go in with follow-on questions will take us to different places potentially because of different backgrounds and experiences. But I would encourage everybody to jump in as they see fit. All of you have got with this role from the governance standpoint, understand the role. And so we'll look forward to that. We also would want to say too, again, we've got blocked an hour for each, but we do have a break in between. And I would suggest that we want to take the full hour. So I think we should expect that this interview is going to last at least till 10:15 is how I would anticipate thinking about it, since we had this other administrative business that got added on the front end. But if any other questions on the process from my fellow commissioners?
Sounds good.
We'll have and for the public that may be joining, we'll have a break. Whenever we finish with the first round of interviews, we'll reconvene at 11 p.m. for the beginning of the second.
11 a.m.
11 a.m. PM. Yeah.
I really wasn't going to be here tonight. I do stay sometimes.
11 a.m. Thank you, Doug, for that. Okay, well, I'm going to jump right in, but I think just to kick it off for each of the candidates, but we've had a chance to read the materials, but Calvin, maybe just start a little bit with the bio of your path that led you to North Dakota, led you to a career in economic development and banking, and tell us how you got to this spot.
How I got to this spot, sure. Well, thank you, Governor. So, well, good morning, and thank you for the chance to interview with you today. So, I grew up in Western Kansas, in a small town, maybe slightly bigger than Arthur, but probably not by much, in a farming community. Did my undergrad work at Kansas State, and after I finished there, actually ended up getting married, and we moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. And we lived for 11 years in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I finished my master's at the University of Nebraska, and then also worked for the Chamber of Commerce in Lincoln as their vice president of government affairs, and so handled all of their legislative affairs. And then I moved over and worked for about 3 years for a public relations advertising agency, doing a variety of consulting public relations things. And knew I wanted to move back into the chamber world. And so I had been looking around and got a call to come to North Dakota, and went home on my 10th wedding anniversary and said, "Hey, Amy, we're going to go on a trip." And she said, "Where?" And I said, "North Dakota." And that was not what she was expecting. But we came up, interviewed. It was a really good fit for me. And so had a chance to really gain some valuable experience working at the chamber. I was there 13 years. Then when the bank was doing its reorganization, and Eric was talking about the position that they were creating to work with the legislatively directed programs and economic development and all of those sorts of attributes, I was very interested. And so I moved over to the bank. And so I've had 8 years of intensive banking experience working at BND, and started in, I can't remember, I had the longest title in state government at the time, but working on the legislatively directed programs. And then when Eric retired and Todd was appointed, I moved up to become the Chief Business Development Officer. So that's a kind of a short background of how I got here.
And you're familiar with the bank's mission, of course, which spans farming and ranching, commerce and industry, and is different than other banks in that it's mission driven. But maybe just to speak to how that mission resonates with you.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've had a chance to really observe, the two previous presidents up close at the bank and work with them, and really gain an understanding about the bank and its mission. And the word I use a lot with our staff is legacy. So the Bank of North Dakota is a 105-year-old institution, and it is really intertwined in the state's history. And so I think the president of the Bank of North Dakota really has to have a servant leadership attitude. and understand that you are the caretaker of this 105-year-old institution. And as Eric Hardmar always said, our job is to make sure that it's around for another 105 years. And so, as I think about the bank and think about its mission and how it really intertwines in the state, I think that it is really intended to be a problem solver for the state. And there's that public-private partnership where we help local communities solve problems with their loans. We work with the Industrial Commission, bring programs forward to you as we did, in the last meeting with the R-Wish program. So really looking at what are the financing gaps in the state and how do we work with those. And then the other part is really collaboration and relationships and making sure that we're working with our partner agencies in trying to address issues and make life better for our both our local political subdivisions, but then obviously also for the residents. So I think, as I think about the bank's mission and what we're intended to do, as I think has been drilled into all of us, we are the bank of good. And how do we serve the state?
Thank you. I'll kick it over to the Attorney General.
Obviously you're quite familiar with the operation of the bank. You've been there a long time and playing a pivotal role. Tell us a little bit about the interplay between the direction from the Bank Advisory Board and the NDIC as oversight of that. How do you see that functioning at its essence? And then what, if anything, would you do as president to maybe form that to it? I'm not suggesting it needs a different vision, but maybe you have one.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I've actually thought about quite a bit about this. Generational change is really interesting. And that was something I went through at the, when I came to Bismarck and began running the Bismarck Mandan Chamber, because there was a generational shift. And I was the leading edge of that shift in doing things a different way. And, I don't get to every industrial commission meeting, but I think the essence of your question is thinking about, as we look forward, we are really in a bit of a generational shift. Eric, Tim, Al, the whole exec team that had been there for essentially kind of 20 years has moved out. We have a new exec team coming in, which is all younger. And so that relationship that we have is, I think, being redefined, and I've seen it at the legislative level as well. Last session, I think, as you know, some of what I would consider the institutional memory was not there, and so last session was a little bit chaotic in working through some things. I think as I look at where we're at today and where we need to go, there are some things that I would probably do differently. I think that, obviously this position is working for the Industrial Commission and reporting up to you, and you have the ultimate oversight. And so I think part of what I've observed, and I was thinking about this after the last meeting, is that we spent a lot of time talking tactics with you and talking about loans and those sorts of things. We probably need to make a shift and talk more strategy and really provide an understanding of some of those things that we're working on and how it interplays and relates to what's happening in the state. But I think also one of the things that occurred to me is, we probably need a dashboard that provides you with a look at the bank on a monthly basis. So, we're always looking at, they call it the CAMEL, capital assets management, earnings liability, or liquidity. So that's what we're managing every month at the bank through our investment committee and also through our investment committee. And so I think part of the shift is, we need to do a better job reporting up to you and providing some of that data. I think the other thing that has struck me is that, at the bank, we do the roundtable internally with our bankers to look at deals before we start bringing them through the process. And while we can't pre-flight probably everything with every industrial commission member, I do think that when we start looking at those larger credits and those bigger relationships, that's probably a conversation with the chairman to say, okay, here's something we're looking at. and here's our thought process behind it and why we think it makes sense to move forward. And so I think some of that pre-flight that we do probably makes a lot of sense. I think the advisory board plays a really important role, and the changes that we made with the advisory board to create the committee structure has been very, very valuable and provided us with the ability to use their expertise. So with the Finance and Credit Committee, excuse me, we have Brenda Foster who chairs that, and also Christy Ovenire from a banker from up in Hazleton, and we're really able to utilize their expertise and help us think through and look at some of those credits to make sure that we're not missing something. So I think that interplay is very important. One of the things that I look at going forward is, how do we also have time with not just at our meetings to talk about strategy and maybe shifting some of that, but also how do we, carve out some time to sit down with you as a board as we're getting ready to do our strategic planning and really talk about, what are the priorities, what are the things that you see, those sorts of things. So I think there's an interplay there. I think the interesting part about this position is it is a lot about the relationships and understanding how to collaborate and how to make sure that you are meeting those key audiences where they're at. So I guess that's a few thoughts.
Thanks.
Any follow-ups on that, Drew?
No follow-ups, thanks.
Doug?
Maybe I'd just pivot off from, you had talked about the level of experience, or that we had a younger risk management team in the bank and an executive board, or at that executive level. We had a pretty good overview of your past and your experience. Do you have any other executive level bank experience involved?
Yeah.
And that'd be helpful
Yeah.
as we work through this process.
No, that's a great question. So, and I guess let me clarify something. While we have a new executive team that's coming in, we don't lack experience. So when you look at the background of Kirby, his, couple of decades in banking experience, Craig's got at least a couple of decades. Rob Finning, our CFO, has amazing experience. So we have great experience related to banking within our executive team. And I think, and I'm going to get to your question here in a second, but I think one of the key parts of being the president of BND is really understanding how to leverage your talent. You're not going to be everything to all different pieces, and you really have to have a strong team in place that really knows what they're doing. And as I think about my management philosophy, it's hire good people, provide them with really strong direction and your outcomes that you're looking for, and then let them work through it to figure out how to get there. Because with a $10 billion institution, you cannot manage every detail every day of the things that are going on. You got to have a great team to help you lead. So when I look at my banking experience and I compare it to others, I didn't come up through the teller line and have that whole experience where I grew into a position. I came to BND and they threw me into the deep end, pretty much right off the bat. And so I really have a different experience probably than others in that, my first portfolio that I was managing was, kind of that legislatively directed programs that went from 250 to 1.1 billion. And so that's where I really cut my teeth, was in working with those legislatively directed programs and how do we help communities and how do we get them to grow. Where I really cut my teeth on the banking side is student loans. And student loans is in and of itself quite an interesting division because you have 94,000 borrowers and co-borrowers. You have 56,000 loans out there, and you have a whole system that you're managing that is much more like a retail bank as opposed to what we do on the other side, which is the commercial banking. And so it's it was a lot in the student loan division where I really got my banking experience, if you will, and really grew to understand reporting and how do we work with audit and transformation on the technology side, all of those sorts of things.
Thank you.
Doug, any follow-ups there?
No, there was some I was gonna get into, but actually he answered it when
Yeah,
because it was about the leadership, where would,
yeah.
how would you lead? And I think you summed it up in
Yeah.
your answer.
I've got a follow-up on the student loan. You mentioned in your resume that you submitted that you created and fostered and mobilized a new culture for folks in the education market after a concerning leadership style was identified and significant changes were initiated.
Yeah.
I don't remember hearing anything about that at an NDIC meeting. But now it's here in your resume, so it'd be interesting for you to fill us in on what that means.
So I think I want to lay this out for you since we're in open session. So when Todd was moved up to become the president of the bank, I took over the student loan division at that point. And as I was taking that over and we were getting into it, I had really began to get a feeling that there were some key challenges there, and particularly with the culture of that division. And so as part of our strategic planning process, working with our consultant, some of the concerns I had were proven to be true. And so we did further investigation between myself and the HR director and interviewed our team and also employees that had left about kind of the culture and what was happening there and the leadership style of our two managers there. And in the end, made a determination that we had to make a very big culture shift because the culture that was being fostered was not representative of the Bank of North Dakota and who we were. And so we terminated the top two managers at the student loan division. And I, for 18 months, became the education market manager in addition to my other duties. And we really worked to transition that culture. And so, as we worked our way through the process, when we made the decision to make a change, we were very transparent with the staff, not about, obviously the reasons for the change, but why we trying to think how to phrase that. We obviously couldn't go into detail about why we made the change, but they understood that we were making a cultural shift. And so we're very upfront and transparent with them about what we were doing and our goals to make sure that the student loan division really felt like they were heard by the executive team and that issues weren't held down below us and that we were going to make sure that they had the support of the entire executive team at the bank and the different divisions. They had always sort of felt like they were isolated and that they were not part of the bank was the term I always heard. And so we've worked really hard at that over the last 2 years, done a lot of different things to really bring them in and make them part of the culture. And part of that was just me being present and establishing that culture and that transparency and addressing some of the key things that they really felt there were issues with. And so we have done that. And I would tell you that when I think about the things that I've done in my career and, people say, well, what are you most proud of? Sometimes it's, the big loans that we do or whatever it is. I would tell you that probably the thing I'm most proud of is the cultural transformation that we have made in our student loan division. And I look at them today and where they're at and how they function and really work together as a team. That is my biggest accomplishment at B&B.
And do you feel in terms of where you are now in terms of because you tried this cultural division or difference between one group versus another, where do you feel you're at on sort of the full synthesis of having a positive culture across all the groups?
We do. That's, one thing we've really worked on is to get rid of the silos, if you will. And so one of the things that I think has been most valuable in that perspective is our engagement with risk management. So when I first got to the bank, risk management was, sort of viewed as, well, we're not going to really call them because they're going to come find something wrong. And, we don't necessarily want to pull them in. And so that's something we worked really hard on. And the cultural shift on that from when I began at the bank to today is 180 degrees. And so now we engage risk management, for instance, in kind of everything we do. So when we got ready to do the whole shift on student loans and say, okay, we're going to go in-state and not do out-of-state anymore, we brought risk management in and we worked through that to look at, okay, are there other issues we need to be thinking about on fair lending or whatever that is? And so we've engaged across the bank, I think a much more cultural shift to one B&B is what I call it. And Todd has really helped, I think, bring it forward, and it's become part of our culture. There's more work to do there, but definitely we are a very high functioning team at this point. And when you think about, the amount of business that we do with a $6 billion loan portfolio, we do $4 billion a month in wires, over 10,000 different transactions going out of our wire division each month. You have to really function as a team. And so it's about the team and the culture. And then that leads to the thing that we're all concerned about, which is the risk management and making sure that we take care of the safety and soundness at the bank. And we have people implementing those policies and taking care of business every day.
Well, the managing risk leads right into my next question.
Could I do
Yeah,
a
please.
follow-up?
Yeah, jump right in.
Did you, about the time that you moved into that position, did we already sell off our largest book of business in student loans? So it was down to just this core business we use now?
Yeah, so we sold in 2017, we sold the remaining loans from the federal student loan portfolio. There was about 250 million roughly, a little higher or lower than that. So it was in 2017 that we sold that. And so then, I came in after we did that sale. And so I've been there while we've done the state sponsored student loan program. So at that point, it had shrunk down to, our portfolio was about 1.3 billion, 1.4 billion. Then we sold that 200, might have been 270 off to the group in Texas.
It was the majority.
Yeah, it was all of our federally guaranteed student loans.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Because you sort of mentioned managing risk, but maybe spend a minute talking about your experience managing risk in the loan portfolio, because from where we sit, what this thing, you've got outstanding economic development and externally facing experiences with around the state, and our legislative directive is a lot of that is in some ways economically development. A lot of the student loan is reported here to be covered by guarantees. But we've got the real risk management is in the part of the bank where you haven't been spending time the last 8 years. So tell us a little bit about your experience in that, because that's, of course, one of the core functions in the bank president, ultimately the one who's responsible for risk management.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so what I would say is that we have, I think, really good risk mitigation systems in place. We have great policies. When you start thinking about me personally and where I've engaged. So, when we sort of 2 or 3 years ago, when I began thinking about this idea of maybe one day, becoming the president of the bank, that was an area that I identified. And so have worked thinking about me personally and where I've engaged. So, when we sort of 2 or 3 years ago, when I began thinking about this idea of maybe one day, becoming the president of the bank, that was an area that I identified. And so have worked really hard on that to really build on that experience. So a couple of thoughts. One, I've been through the Graduate School of Banking, which is the 3-year intensive school that bankers go through to really understand how to operate a bank and lay that foundation for management experience. I have obviously been very engaged, as you said, in the legislatively directed. But I've also worked a lot over on the other side of the bank related to the commercial. Specifically, my role has been to work with a lot of those larger credits. So, Rainbow, Basin, Cirilon, those are all the group that I work with. So I've had the opportunity to really understand how to develop structure, risk mitigation, and how to put those loans together in a way that makes sense for them and also for the state. The other thing I've had the opportunity to do is over the last 3 years, I have been one of the 4 approvers internally. So we have sole and dual approval. And so I've been one of the 4 that's been able to do that. So I've read a lot of credits over the course of the last 3 years and been involved in the roundtables and the investment committee discussions about where we're at and where we go and what kinds of loans are we looking at. So I've served on, a couple of the internal task forces that we've had looking at various things, the out-of-state lending that we do, those sorts of things. So I've had a lot of experience with the B&D process and in understanding how we mitigate risk at the Bank of North Dakota.
And do you think we have everything in place we need relative to risk?
We can always do better, without question. I think that if I, what keeps me up at night if I have this position, cybersecurity and ransomware is sort of one of the biggest things that I think about when you look at what's happening around the world and how artificial intelligence is now advancing those things. And thinking there's a number of examples I've shared with staff related to, how AI is now evolving. So I think that as we look at our risk mitigation, it's really understanding that key on cybersecurity. I also think that AI, I saw a quote that you had, Governor, where you said you felt like, efficiency could be increased by, I think it was 20% by using AI. And we're in the beginning stages of looking at that. And I think that, from my perspective, as we develop our internal policy and look at that, there's obviously opportunity with advancing our reporting, but I think also on that security side, I would hope that there would be additional things we could do with NDIT to really make sure that we're secure on the cybersecurity side. So that's, when I think about risk, that's probably the one internally that keeps me up at night. The other risk that I think that we are working on that I think is extraordinarily important, and talk about generational shift at this point in time, is the work with the capital plan and how we put that together and get it adopted and then begin the implementation of that. Because when I look at where we're at today and some of those challenges, and I talked a little bit about that generational shift, and we lost some of the institutional norm that we had had. As we look to the future and we're going to have term limits, we're going to have a whole new group of people rolling through on a pretty consistent basis. And, obviously one of the most important pieces to us is going to be the bank's capital and how do we make sure that we're managing that in an appropriate context in coordination with the capital policy that the Industrial Commission puts in place. And so I think as I look out to the 27 and 29 session, having that capital plan in place, I think is to me a key risk mitigator that we really need to implement. And the other part of that I think is important, not just for DFI, but if you look at our S&P report, so we meet with S&P every year and they give us our rating. One of the things that they mention in there consistently is the concern about the bank's capital, and if the legislature were to suddenly decide that they were going to start appropriating excessive amounts of capital or start telling the bank to do loans from a political perspective as opposed to a credit perspective. So I think when I think about risk, I think that capital plan again is something that is really important to our risk mitigation.
Thank you. Drew, you're up next.
Thanks. That raises a question. Risk mitigation. I don't know if it's it's a term or mark, but you're looking at this, and it's a unique role in that, very significant economic interests in the state and the private sector, and then enormous policy initiatives coming through the bank, all overseen by the Industrial Commission. Relationships are critically important, obviously. It's very evident in your materials and people who are supporting you and your references, and you go through that. Tell us about your personal risk mitigation strategies, because the reality of this is there's a familiarity with you. There will be. And with that, I can speak from experience across a lot of different roles in my life. There comes a lot of expectation with that. And so often it's our job to dampen that expectation with the realities of what we're called upon to. Tell us about that interplay between those relationship components of the support for you or in anybody in this role, and then the cold hard facts of overseeing bank operations, making determinations, and guiding a team.
So, sure, a couple of thoughts, and that's a great question. To get to the heart of it is, do I have the ability to say no? I think.
Yeah, that's more succinct. It's easy to be more succinct.
So let me touch on that. So I've worked for CEOs my entire career. And I have as I've said, I have 8 years of intensive banking experience. I think one thing that I bring to this position that nobody else brings is I was the president of a chamber of commerce. And I think the only thing more maybe political than the Chamber of Commerce is a church board. And so I've had to deal with, those pressures and that familiarity with people knowing me and wanting to do specific things kind of my entire career. I think that when I look at this position, and to your point, the ability to really say no is related to the institution. And it goes back to servant leadership. So this isn't about me. It is not about people getting me to do things for them. This is about what's in the best interest of this institution that's been here for 105 years. And our job is to make sure that it's here for another 105 years. I think if you talk to even my most ardent supporter, who I think is out there, he would tell you that I'm pretty good at saying no. It's a skill I've developed over the course of the years. The ability to say no, but be able to maintain those relationships and move forward. And so as I think about, how do I put the mitigator on the pressures? I think about my responsibility to the institution and making sure that I take care of it, because that's who ultimately my responsibilities is to the Industrial Commission and to the Bank of North Dakota, and to make sure that we're making the best decisions possible based on the credit criteria and the other parameters as set up by this governing board. So if you want, I can give you a couple of instances of probably when I've said no, if you want a couple, but yes, I've been very unpopular at times.
Yeah, well, and along those lines, it's a little bit different when you know that there's a hierarchy above you that likely you can't persuade them to do something different. But when you're at a position that actually you're at the top, yeah, the arm twisting is a little different.
Oh,
And
I don't disagree. I mean, yes, I've experienced that even in the position that I'm in today.
The along those lines, there are decisions that we make within BND probably a little bit different than the normal banking institutions out there, with the amount of risk we take on some of our loan portfolio, sometimes designed to address distressed economies and certainly help to enhance economic development, which I know you've had some experience in. But during this last 8 years, have you worked with a deteriorating or helping to develop some workout plans, or even collection strategies, because that's,
Yes.
okay. Could you elaborate just a little bit? I know you can't say names and you can't get into stuff like that. That's privileged information. But few
So-
examples.
So one would be a large facility in a community that for a number of years struggled along until there was a decision made that it needed to move into bankruptcy. And so I was involved in the lead up to that, but then also as we looked at the workout strategy and how did we move forward and make sure that that entity remained an important part of that community. So that would be one example.
How about on the collection side?
I have not, I have not been involved necessarily
On the collection
on the
side?
actual collection side. You know, we have our special assets team, and they really deal with that for the most part. Occasionally, I know that's come up maybe to the president's spot, but not often that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's any other good examples that I could give you.
No, I know the last 8 years have been a little bit different, so.
Yeah.
But we have had some situations,
We
and that's
have.
why I asked the question
Yes.
about workout strategies
So-
and collections.
And I'm very heavily involved in 2 of those right now. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other follow-ons?
No, that's,
Well, we're still in the sort of generally in the topic of managing risk here. And
Yep.
one of the things that's been more of a recent topic at NDIC meetings is capital planning and the need for that. And this relates, of course, to the touches on what we talked about as the cash management study, which relates to cash withdrawals by the legislature and also in the cash management study. It's the, the preliminary part of that is pointing out that we've got a commingling of treasury function with the banking function. And just would be interested in your perspective on the thoughts about how do we get to a future state of a capital plan where the bank is secure and not at risk with not the risk that it currently faces, but also not subsidized by the current approach that we take in terms of commingling treasury, which provides a big subsidy to the bank.
That's a really interesting question, and I've had the chance just to review the draft study. What I would say is that if we're going to move in that direction, that's going to be a very big policy decision by the Industrial Commission and by the legislature. So we have looked at a couple of scenarios that I've had. So Rob is starting to look at this to really look at if we were to separate that out, how would we capitalize the bank? More than likely, I think the best scenario that we've seen so far is we would need to issue bonds, probably around $4 billion, to make the bank, keep the bank at about a $6 billion level. So I think we're starting to think about what that might look like if there were that decision made to separate those functions out. I think there's a lot of other discussion that needs to go into that as we look at that study, but there are definitely, as we've looked at, there are definitely things that we can do better related to cash management. I think that's the importance of that study, is identifying out where are the gaps and where are the things that we can do better. So that's just my initial thoughts, Governor. I had a chance to review the draft study, and we've made some initial discussions in it internally to look at it, but I don't have a real answer for that today.
So, okay, separate, taking out the cash management and just in the current steady state,
Yeah.
where we have this commingling, there's a discussion of the capital plan, but tell us about your involvement in that and tell us about where that and how you think about capital planning for the bank.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great question. So obviously, when we look at the bank, and leaving the commingling in there now for the moment. So, we have about $5.5 billion of revenue that comes in per year, between 5.5 and 6. And so that comes in. Part of our challenge is that, our duration on our loan or on our deposits is about 2.5 years roughly. We're making longer term loans, obviously, against our deposit base. So most of our loans have a 5-year term with an amortization of 15, 20, 25 years, wherever that is, depending on the asset. And so part of our challenge, excuse me, in capital planning is, where do we take the interest rate risk? And what the bank has chosen to do, I think, in coordination with thinking about the expectation that the bank has consistent, strong earnings, is to really take the interest rate risk in that 1 to 5 year period. And then there's a hedging strategy that goes kind of for years 6 to 20. And so that hedging strategy is really important in that if you look at a normal kind of a commercial sector bank, private sector bank, they may have their earnings go up and down. So one year maybe they make 10 million, and the next year they make 5 million. The thing that we've really tried to manage our capital plan to and to balance out is to make sure that as a bank, we are providing consistent earnings. And so by utilizing the hedging, that allows us to kind of make that line a little more straight. We obviously still have some variance depending on what happens with interest rates and how that plays out with the Fed and those sorts of things. But we really try to manage our balance sheet in that way to make sure that we are providing consistent, stable earnings. So the other part of capital planning then goes to what's our crisis plan if it all goes awry. And so there's a variety of mechanisms and tools that we have related to that. Some of it is, we have about $4 billion in borrowing capacity between the Federal Home Loan Bank and then also with the Federal Reserve. Some of that requires pledged assets that we would need. Some of that, depending on which entity it is, requires pledged assets. But we have access to about $4 billion of dry powder, if you will. At this moment, what's interesting about us is that we're usually pretty liability sensitive at the bank, which means that, as we're looking at our earnings and we're looking at our net interest margin, how does the borrowings play into that? At this moment, we have no borrowings. And so we are, really looking at our net interest margin around that 2%. And what's kind of interesting is based on the fact that we don't have borrowings, looking out into the future, we could have a couple of really good years, depending on kind of how the interest rates fluctuate over the course of the next couple of years. So we have an entire plan and that goes into what do we do first, what do we do second, and then how do we make sure that we have liquidity that we need, both short-term and long-term, to keep the bank operational.
I'll just make a couple of comments since partly because we are in a public meeting and this is the board of the bank, and then I'll kick it over to Drew. But when I hear that the capital plan, being based on consistent, stable earnings, and that's driving, and earlier said we need to talk about strategy, not tactics. That would be a strategy because you'd be making a bunch of trade-offs in risk management to go for stable, consistent earnings versus maybe higher earnings, but with more volatility in that. And so I guess it just is an action item for Karen and the board, if that's as part of our discussions with the bank. We should be having that level of strategic decision around the capital plan, not just the bank deciding that that's what the goal is. The commission should be the ones that's deciding what those goals are, not the bank. And again, this is just something which I think you're familiar with from the presentations, but when we say, we are in a position to have a number of good years going forward because of the net interest margin. Well, the we isn't the Bank of North Dakota. The we is the state of North Dakota, because our current cash management policy of commingling is what enables a lot of that spread to occur because of the low priced deposits. And I think that's, again, anybody that in this position going forward has got to be able to navigate what might be a very different future as opposed to the current way we've been managing the bank, to make sure we've got clarity around where we're making money and where we're just subsidizing spread because of other things that are in either practice or in state law. But I'll turn it over to Drew.
I want to just quickly, there's a couple things I want to make sure. I'm looking at the clock here, and the time goes quickly. I'm curious to the degree you can discuss in the wake of some recent meetings, we've had some, discussions about questions raised in executive session, just talking about information that we're getting as we go through. And there have been some moments where we're going back and forth with questioning of the crew who's here, yourself included, with the bank. I'm just curious what, like on a personal level, when you've left those meetings, the last 2 or 3 industrial commission meetings, what has been your response personally to think about, to anticipate, how to make sure you're getting the right kind of information in front of the industrial commission, and then maybe as a group that you all, how you discussed it?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I actually wasn't at the previous industrial commission meeting. So I wasn't in on that discussion. So I was at this industrial commission.
But I mean, it can be general too, like responding to input from the industrial commission.
Okay. Nope. So actually, after that meeting, we went back and I assembled part of our team and we had a conversation about really understanding what was being asked of the bank and how do we look at the information that we're providing.
Yeah.
And when I opened up with some of my thoughts about how do we do a better job at communicating with you and in providing you the information that you need, we began that conversation. And I also have some other thoughts about, that they're working on related to how do we present information in a different way and meet you where you're at, as opposed to bank speak, I call it. And so I think, yes, I have pulled our team together and started having conversations about what does this look like. And I think part of it is coming back to you, to the governor's point, and having that conversation about, the strategy of, okay, what are the key metrics that you want to see and how do we put together that dashboard? Is it, we have a dashboard for our camels. Do we want to see that? Do you want to see our risk management dashboard that we have? So I think it's thinking about what are this from a strategic perspective, as you're the governing board of the bank, what is it that you want to see that's going to make you feel comfortable that we are managing the risk and the mitigating that in an appropriate way to make sure that the bank is on sound footing.
By custom, we meet monthly, and I've only been there 2.5 years, so I'm a junior member by far, but to meet monthly, and then is that frequently enough? And then in between that what do you think is the appropriate communication with the industrial commission? We have appropriately, we're not whining about this, we have appropriately open meetings for a reason. This is the public's business. And so we, not only are we, precluded from that, I can tell you after 2.5 years, we never do that. Or the members of this, we never talk about industrial commission work, ever. On the way to the vehicles at the end of the day, ever. So what about that? Things come up between meetings. Tell us about what your philosophy on that would be as the president of the Bank of North Dakota. What would be the communication strategy? We've got outstanding staff, and Karen obviously has recently been named as the director, taking the interim away from that title. Tell us a little bit about that communication, because things happen between month to month.
Oh, yeah, with that question.
Can't talk with all of us, or 2 of us even. So.
Right. No, I think that's a great question. So yeah, I know that we do talk to Karen on a pretty regular basis. I talk to her on various things. So I'll just give you an example, because I've probably done this with the Ag Commissioner. Well, not probably, I have done this with the Ag Commissioner. there's been instances where something has come up related to an agriculture question or loan or something of that nature, where I've actually reached out to the ag commissioner and said, okay, we have this opportunity or challenge, whichever it is. I need to talk to you about where you want to, like, I need to get your input and insight into how you think we should approach this. And so I've probably done that with the ag, I've done that with the ag commissioner, just based on the programming that I've been managing at the bank. I've done that with him. I would tell you that, you know, with clean, sustainable energy, you have two legislators that are chairs. And so we've worked closely with them as well as we are trying to put things together related to those loans or whatever it is, to make sure that we're meeting their legislative intent. And so I think it's a matter of reaching out. And I think, as I mentioned, you know, it probably falls to the chairman of the board to provide that guidance in between meetings if we have something that comes up. That's probably, that is my approach and how I've handled it.
You've been comfortable with it as it goes along, and
Yeah.
like I say, you've been doing this longer than I've been in this role, but
Yeah.
Doug?
Yeah. Thanks, and I have appreciated that. I know previous presidents have come forward too, and I know one of the conversations that I'll just share, because a lot of people don't know this, is when the conversation came up about feeding livestock, and the bank approached the livestock industry and some associations, and they said, oh, no, it's not a big deal. But those are all cow-calf people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feed livestock.
Mm-hmm.
They raise calves.
Mm-hmm.
And that could have been a crucial mistake that was made by the bank if they would have just kept going down that path, and we wouldn't have been able to develop. So I do appreciate that you guys come forward and ask questions, because it does probably set the right parameters that we as a board need to discuss if we want to go down some of those roads. I want to back up just a little bit, just so I understand. You mentioned tactics a couple different times. Are you using that synonymously with fundamentals? Because that's how I'm interpreting it, fundamentals and strategy.
Well,
Because the tactics are, I just need clarification, because I don't want to make up my own
okay.
interpretation.
I'm trying to think about how I've used that to
Well, you said
give me.
we should probably move away from tactics and focus more on strategy.
Yeah. So, okay, I get where you're going now. And fundamentals is probably a good perspective. I'll give you one of my thoughts. I think that spending a ton of time looking at the concentration model of the bank is probably not the best use of your time. I think we can hit that at a high level, but I think the conversations need to be much more around the strategy. To the governor's point, you know, the history of the bank has been that the investment portfolio is managed in a very conservative way with all government-backed securities and hedged to make sure that we have that consistent return. Where the interest rate risk has been taken is on the loan portfolio. If there is a shift that the state wants to make related to the Bank of North Dakota, and in changing that dynamic, then that is a strategy that we need to have a conversation about at the industrial commission level. So I think when I look at it and I think about some of the things that we're bringing to report to you, you know, that, for instance, we do the quarterly performance highlights. Okay, I think those are interesting. They provide a lot of really good information, but if we go to a monthly dashboard, you're going to have that information each and every month, as opposed to waiting for us to come in every quarter and go through, you know, 15 pages of here's our loan to deposit ratio, all of those sorts of things. So I think talking more at the strategic level, as opposed to, well, tactically, here's what's happening in our concentration portfolio, and we have a yellow in our multifamily in Fargo. I mean, that's not the level that you, as the board, should be functioning at. And
Well-
that's, yeah,
Information is good,
yeah,
but it still drills down. It even goes further than that.
yeah,
And it is about establishing fundamentally,
Yeah.
how are we rating risk?
Yep.
How are we managing it? Because there's two different aspects to this bank that no other bank deals
Yes.
with. You have a legislative directive, which means the state of North Dakota is going to cover that risk if it goes sour.
Mhm.
But there's that other asset that is very much at risk because that's how it's managed. That is decisions we make by approving loans,
Mhm.
but also by giving the authority for the bank
right.
to move forward and do that stuff. And I guess in all of that, I'm trying to wrap my head around all this
Yeah.
conversation because managing risk, underwriting it is so crucially important.
Yes.
So I just wanted to get what you said, make sure that I captured it. Because that's part of creating that culture too within.
Completely. And I think that, you know, when it comes to risk, and you're exactly right. So Bank of North Dakota is unique and we take more risk than a commercial bank.
Legislatively directed to.
Well, yeah. But when you think about, let's just take the accelerated growth loan program for a minute. So, you know, when we created that, the idea was how do we get banks comfortable with doing financing based on monthly recurring revenues and not on assets? And so we identified that financing gap, developed the parameters, but then we came to the Industrial Commission and said, we want to create this program and we're going to put a fence around it with our capital. And we're going to use, and I don't remember what the number was, up to $100 million of our capital that's our criteria for how we're wrapping our arms around this credit risk. And so when we, you know, take those kinds of risk, it's always with our eyes wide open, and it's with really trying to make sure that there is a understanding of what that risk is going to be, and bringing that forward. And so when we think about, you know, some of the things that we do, yeah, we do take more risk because we are a mission-directed bank. And another one, you know, I'll give you an example of when we took more risk and it didn't work out was, I shouldn't say didn't work out because it did, but when you look at the Bakken boom and B&D stepped in and helped finance hotels and apartment buildings, and we had great valuations and everything was rosy, and then everything tanked, and all of a sudden we had a lot of work out to do. And so that was part of, as you think about it, you know, the mission of the bank was to really help the state through that time period. But then we had the hangover that we had to work through that took a few years to kind of figure out how are we going to work through, you know, some of those challenges. So inherently, because we are a participation bank and because of our mission, we do assume we assume more risk than a private sector bank would. The other part of that, though, is we account for that. If you think about the risk mitigation, we account for that in our capital ratio because, you know, the number that we've brought forward and have been using and probably needs some discussion is 12%. That's kind of our number. So we're at 1.2 billion right now in our capital. Normal banks are probably more around 10. 9 is the, you know,
10%.
10%. Yeah. 9 is kind of the industry norm, if you will. And so we account for that risk in our capital plan, making sure that we're capitalized adequately. And I think that's going to be one of the key points going forward as we think about the capital plan and working with you is, okay, what do we see that risk being over the course of the next couple of years? What's happening with the economy? How do we account for that? And we, in our CECL model, we try to account for those sorts of things, but we're going to have to project and work with the Industrial Commission to figure out what amount of capital we need to retain and what amount of capital can go as a dividend.
So shifting gears just a
Sure.
little bit, because it's probably along those lines. What do you believe are the main ingredients, the most important ingredients within a corporate structure to foster that type of success? Because there's a lot of moving parts within what we've been talking about.
Oh, there's moving parts all over.
Yeah.
It begins with culture and the people. Unless you have the right team in place and you have trusted leadership, and I hope I'm trusted leadership within our team, and the ability to lay out that vision and bring both your management team along and the employees. It all begins and ends in a lot of ways with culture. Now, after you have the right culture and you have the right vision laid out, then you put the metrics in place through your strategic plan that says, here's what we're trying to achieve. And then you set your parameters of your metrics of how you want to achieve that and in what time frame, and you move it forward from there. And so, there are a ton of moving parts at the bank, and I think a key component is really understanding the people and the different processes and how all of those interplay together.
So what would your metrics be? Because metrics are,
Yep. Oh, no, it's a great question. So I think part of our metrics come back to, as we look at our regulatory levels. So, what is our tier 1 risk capital? What's our loan to deposit ratio? What's our, I just lost it, we're at 14.5%. Our internal metric we look at related to management. What's our liquidity plans? So you have those metrics that you're following related to the regulatory component. But then the other part is, and this is, I think, where it's really unique for the Bank of North Dakota, it's what are the things that we're doing to advance the state? And how do we work with our partner agencies to move forward? Because that's when I think about the Bank of North Dakota and what we're really about, we have to meet all of these metrics. Safety and soundness and all of those are a given. That's what you have to do. But it's thinking creatively about the state has this institution and it can do interesting sorts of different things that other places can't do. And so how do we leverage that? Obviously working with the Industrial Commission to lay out what is that vision, what is that strategic plan, and how do we move forward? I mean, one of the things that I'm really interested in that we kind of goes to maybe one of the governor's points is that, we're the bank for the state agencies. And so that's an area where I don't think we have done a good job in leveraging our expertise to really drive down the number of transactions and really enhance the programming. And so, that's one thing I've thought about that as I look at, staffing, I think we probably need a business banker, if you will, per se, for our agencies. We have business bankers for all of our financial institutions. So our financial institutions are assigned to a different business banker and they have a portfolio. I think we probably really need a business maker, if you will, for our state agencies to make sure that we're driving that forward and creating efficiencies across the board.
thank you.
Well, I don't want to leave here without complimenting you both on the work that you do at the bank, that you've done across all the years. It's well known. You do a really good job there. You work hard, and you've got a lot of relationships that you've cultivated there. And I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to thank you for that, because that takes a lot of time and effort as you go along too. One question I did have is it sounds like but it's not.
Oh, no.
I wanted to ask before you leave, there's going to be, as they say, as only certain kinds of issues make it to the corner office. I'll put it that way.
Yep.
The tiebreakers, right? The things that come in that nobody knows. We don't have enough direction on this. What have you? I'll leave it at that. Tiebreaker. Tell us about your process for that. What really is it in your role now? What would it be as the president of the Bank of North Dakota? Because there are a lot of tiebreakers out there. Ties back into the relationship piece. I've said many times since taking this role, I didn't run for Attorney General to make friends, and people tell me I'm doing a really good job at it. Because,
Yeah.
but it's real. Like that's a real component of it. We have a small state. You're going to see people around. People have more grace than you might imagine. But tell us, Art.
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things that happens now is the staff that works under me, I have a great staff. And so oversight of the student loan division and our legislatively directed programs, and then working with our sustainability officer. And so we have established parameters of where they can make decisions and things happen and they move forward. They bring to me the tiebreakers and the ones where we really have to think about the decision and make sure that we're meeting the mission of the bank and that we're mitigating the risk. I'll just give you an example of one. So in our infrastructure revolving loan fund, we really felt like there was more risk there than the state should be taking. We had communities asking for very large loans with a population that would not be able to service that loan. So we put some metrics in place related to the communities and looked at what are affordability metrics that we could implement that would help ensure protection of our residents. And so we've had 2 instances now where staff has come to me and said, we've looked at this metric. This absolutely does not work. They cannot pay for it. And we need to say no. And so I'm the guy to call and say no. And so I have at least 2 mayors that don't think I'm very much fun. Because
Good start.
because they wanted to do these projects and it was just way over the top of their ability to do it. There was another tiebreaker with a very large corporation that wanted a very substantial loan that I had to be the guy that said no, because our responsibility, and I go back to this, and this is where I put the baseline at, is my responsibility in my current role, and if I become the president of the bank, is to make sure that we are responsible to the institution and to the Industrial Commission and making the right decisions that ensure the longevity and the safety and soundness of the bank. That's our job. And so that's how I measure the metrics of, do I say yes or no? If it comes down to the tiebreaker, and that's where I really look at that and think through, is this a mission-based thing that we should do? Not a mission-based thing that we should do? And if it's not, then do the metrics tell me that this is a issue that we should say no on? And let me expand on that if I can for just a second, because one of the things that I think is most important about the bank is that it is not political. We do policy and we navigate the political situation, but we don't make loans based on a political position. And that's been, I think, a hallmark of the institution, why it's lasted for 105 years. And so that's another sort of foundational thing for me, is it's going to be based on the risk and the criteria and all of those sorts of things that we take internally to look at, not based on who's asking me to do a deal.
Good. Thank you.
Doug, any final questions?
Maybe just one. Thinking about who you are today,
Yeah.
who was the most influential person that fostered who you are today as an executive? Now, you don't have to say their name.
Oh, I can tell you who it is.
But the real question would be, what do you believe they would say that you need to work on to be a better leader and a better executive?
That's a great question. I can tell you exactly who one of the most influential CEOs it still is for me. His name is Ross Wilcox. He's the CEO, or was the CEO, of Union Bank in Nebraska. And he was on the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. And he was one of kind of 3 CEOs that adopted me, if you will, when I got to Lincoln and said, you really have a lot of talent, but you need to quit dressing like Don Johnson. And so That's a true statement, by the way. Don't put that in the paper, please. And so,
Headline.
so I was really fortunate in that I had a group that in a lot of ways took me in and taught me a lot about how to be a business person and how to be a CEO. And I still talk to Ross to this day, and have conversations with him about thinking about, my career and what I'm doing and whatnot. So he's been very influential. I think the three things that I make sure that I'm working on. So one, believe this or not, I'm actually an introvert. And so I have to really focus on making sure that I stay in extrovert mode and that I communicate effectively and that I don't, pull into my introvert shell. I do that on Fridays at 6:00, by the way. So that would be one. The second is making sure that I don't have blind spots. And I have a couple of people at the bank that I rely upon to make sure that I don't have blind spots when it comes to thinking about staffing or thinking about an issue, all of those sorts of things. So I have my own sort of checks and balances internally with our staff that I work on. And then just making sure that as I move forward, that the vision that I have is translated to the staff and they come with you. And the reason I say that is it's kind of hard to be a leader if there's no followers and there's nobody behind you ensuring them look. And so that was something I experienced early in my career where I thought I had a great vision and I was moving forward and I turned around and I was the only one in the parade. And so really making sure that as you have that vision and you're moving forward, that you bring everybody with you. Those are the three things that I talk to my mentors about.
Great. Drew, any else? Any other?
Nope, thank
Okay.
you.
Yep.
We've gone a little bit over the length of time, but Calvin, again, thanks for your time today. Thanks for this open discussion.
Yeah.
And also congratulations on being one of the two finalists, and thanks for everything you've done the past 8 years to help advance the mission, the legacy of the bank.
No, I appreciate that very much. Thank you for the opportunity to sit and talk with you about it. I hope I've expressed I have a passion for the bank, but I also have a passion for the state and in solving problems and finding ways to make sure that we're the bank of good and moving forward in the economic future of our state. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
I
Any idea how many presidents have there been at the bank?
It's not that many.
Yeah,
9 or 12?
Is that right?
But like, yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
Well, Eric was the president for about a fifth of the bank's life.
That's something.
So, okay.
All right, thanks.
And then,
Thank you.
Karen, from a admin standpoint, so we don't have to adjourn and then reconvene and take roll call. Can we just call this a recess in the meeting? So we'll recess and then we'll reconvene at 11 a.m. the Industrial Commission meeting. And this part of our agenda includes the another interview for the Bank of North Dakota president. We want to thank Don Morgan for being here today, and also say congratulations, because you're one of two finalists. We had over 130 people who applied for this role, and great to have you here and great to meet you for the first time today. Thanks for being here. We'll as perhaps has been described, and we described it again the other meeting, the three of us do not get to meet ahead of time to discuss anything about Industrial Commission, and we don't. So this is the first time we've been in a discussion around the candidates. We had delegated authority to the screening committee. Each of us got to appoint one person to that, which you came through that process, but this is fresh for all of us. So we're just going to jump right in. We've had a chance to have the materials distributed that you submitted ahead of time, but we'll just give you a chance to kick it off with your bio and sort of what led you, from Wyoming to North Dakota, and what led you into banking, and what led you to sitting in this chair today as a finalist for the Bank of North Dakota.
Well, absolutely, and thank you for the time. And first and foremost, it's an honor and a privilege just to be here in the seat, be in the finalist, be in this interview with you. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you for Karen for a great process you put together. I know a lot of moving parts with that on all sides. So thank you. Very well done. I grew up in Wyoming on a cattle ranch. That started me out. Grew up on a rake tractor in hot summer days. Went to the University of Wyoming on a rodeo scholarship. So grew up rodeoing. My dad rodeoed and my grandparents rodeoed. And so that was a part of my life.
What were your events?
Tie down roping and steer wrestling. So I rode bulls in high school, and then my dad finally made me come to my senses. So I'm glad he
It
did.
went from getting bucked off bulls to voluntarily jumping off speeding horses.
Somehow it made sense in my mind at the time, yeah. If you figure out the rodeo cowboy mind, let me know, because I'm still trying to figure it out. But went to University of Wyoming, met my future wife, Shanda Doan of Black Leg Ranch down there on the rodeo team. After college, came up to Bismarck, and now Bismarck is home. I like to say I traded elk hunting for duck hunting, and haven't looked back. I love duck hunting and waterfowl, so didn't get a chance to do that much down in Wyoming. There's just not a lot of that. But Bismarck's been home for the last 24, 25 years. Started out at BNC National Bank just down the street here. I was blessed to start my career under a banking genius, Dave Huckstra. Been a friend of mine ever since. I got a great start with him in all things credit and all things banking. A tremendous mentor of mine, actually full circle. He now works for me. And so we've been able to maintain that relationship throughout. And he's been a great friend and mentor, but it gave me a great start in banking. I've always said the best place to start in banking is credit, because it's the heartbeat of a bank. You can learn all things about the bank, but you learn all things about her customer base. And if you can learn credit and all that applies there, it's just a great place, jumping off point. My son's actually going to Boise. He's going to become a CPA too, and he's working for Star Aid's credit department as an intern this summer. So he's kind of off on that path as well, which is exciting, kind of a proud dad moment for me. But grew up doing that, and BNC at the time had not only North Dakota operations and customers, agriculture, business, real estate, but they also had Minneapolis, where they were doing national construction companies, multi-state home builders, and then they got down to Arizona, when a lot of the banks were going to Arizona and working through, the land plays. And so flew around, got to look at a lot of credit, worked on special assets, worked on all things credit, from here to Minneapolis to Arizona. Then we moved to Texas, Fort Worth, Texas. We were rodeoing, and our kids were young, and Shanda and I said, if we're going to do it, we better do it before they get too old. So we did. And ended up working for a great group of bankers down there with a bank called South. It was Omni American, then it got bought by Southside Bank, but about a 3 or 4 billion publicly traded bank. And again, just was blessed to get in with a group of great bankers. Also really blessed looking back. I moved down there right before the 08-09 financial crisis. And so I got at the time it wasn't a blessing, but looking back, it was a great experience, a chance to work on large workout deals from hotels, motels, land deals, home builders down in that Texas area with a great group of guys. So got a really good experience there. working that side of it. Started to lead various credit departments down there, got my CPA down there. Just a really, really good experience. Then our kids started getting older, Miss Grandma and Grandpa, and we came to the realization that most young North Dakotans do, and that is North Dakota is the best place to raise a family. So we came home to raise our family. Came home in, I think, 2011 and went to work for Starion Bank and have been there for the last 12 years. The last 10 years of which I've been on the executive team. Started out as chief credit officer. Not much surprise, kind of grew up through the credit ranks. Did a lot of, and Starion had gone through a rapid growth period. They were about 500 million when I came on, and they grew to $1 billion very rapidly, and now we're about $1.8 billion, $1.9 billion. And that growth is good, but with that growth comes you've got to evolve your infrastructure. And Starion was a little bit behind on that. So most of my time on the executive team was coming into like chief credit and evolving that infrastructure, forward to support a larger organization. So revamping loan policy, revamping the systems, eliminating redundancies, replacing manual processes with technology, and really evolving the culture forward in terms of sophistication, in terms of acumen. For example, credit was when I got there, more of a kind of an order taking department, and we had to evolve it to really a think tank, which credit really should be in a bank, is that think tank culture, then bring that think tank mentality to the organization. Did that as chief credit officer for many years, and then moved into chief financial officer, and just taking on a new challenge. And again, similar there, kind of evolved infrastructure for the bank, the budgeting process, the forecasting, the branch allocation methodology, all those things in finance, really worked on that culture and all those systems and policies and practices. Last 4 years, the majority owner and prior CEO, Craig Larson, decided he wanted to step back and hire a new CEO and president. In the last 4 years, him and I have been working through that together. Little did we know it was perfect timing for COVID and the great resignation and shutdowns and the unprecedented rate shock environment and remote work and, just kind of a crazy, polarized, volatile 4 years. And we've been working through that. And when the Bank of North Dakota opportunity came up, I said, hey, what a great opportunity, next challenge for me, a next step in my career. And I'm a believer you only see God's plan in life when you look backwards, and then a lot of things fall into place. And when I look backwards from sitting right here, I can see God's hand at work just preparing me for this moment, where I'm at today. So that's my bio, that's my history, and pause there.
But for clarity, you've been CEO of Starion during this part of this time, or how were you splitting the duties with Craig?
Yeah, I was president for 2020, 2021, and then CEO president 2022, 2023, up until today.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. It's been an interesting CEO transition with that dynamic for sure, but yeah.
Well, thank you for that. To kick things off, we'll kind of rotate through the through questions here, but I'll kick off with the first one, which I know you've had a chance to work with the bank as a customer, because Starion has done loans, but you've also then now, as part of this process, had a chance to look at the mission of the bank, which of course spans from agriculture, farming and ranching, commerce, industry, all of that. But tell us a little bit about applying to this job, and does that mission resonate with you, and how do you think that your experience brings you into this, a different kind of bank, if you will, with a different kind of mission?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I start with the core values. We hire. What resonates with me is making sure that you hire employees based on core values first and culture fit, because I believe you can train skill set, you can train acumen, but you can't train passion, and you can't train culture fit. The core values we implemented when I took over CEO President Starion were seek the need with discipline, inspire confidence with each other, get her done no matter your title, and always do the right thing. And Bank of North Dakota's core values of curious service, ethics, people, teamwork, that's really saying the same thing just with different words. And so first for me, the core values of B&D really resonate. For the second part of that question, my passion throughout all of community banking, credit's really my home base, but my passion is really helping farms, ranch, and businesses in community banking. And I kind of view them as one. One doesn't really exist without the other. Community banking is that capital provider in so many ways of those industries. And that's just where my passion is. And it's why I've stayed in community banking. And I think Bank of North Dakota, what a great story of the Bank of North Dakota. What a great mission it fulfills. We've all seen the charts of what's going on in banking with consolidation. We've all seen the charts of what's going on in agriculture with consolidation. I contend without the Bank of North Dakota, those charts would be steeper. I know for a fact that Bank of North Dakota has helped community banks stay in business longer, smaller community banks stay in business longer, because I've dealt with a lot of those banks. Just the education resources, the access to larger deals that can be participated, the disaster programs during the drought and during the flood and those things. So Bank of North Dakota has had a wonderful mission of supporting not only community banking, but by extension, farms, ranches, and businesses. And I'm excited to be a part of that. So core values resonate with me, the mission resonates with me. And the third for me was I had to in my mind get clear on what vision would I bring to the Bank of North Dakota. What would I see as that future? And so I put down a 5-year picture for myself that resonated with what I believe in and what also I think these industries are going to need. Things like strong banking through more volatile times, and the digital transformation and fintech evolution that's occurring, and how do we evolve and partner and continue to provide education in those. Right along with that is that customer centricity, and then cybersecurity, and those three are all related because this technological disruption is really a serious thing for banking, and by extension agriculture and business. But just evolving into that and kind of following that customer into those new channels where they're going, where they want to go in order to transact financially. It's all going here, really over time. And how do you bring that community banking space there, and by extension business? And so, those, and the third part for me is that vision is talent management. In the industries, agriculture, and especially community banking, especially agriculture, talent management and succession. I've talked to a lot of the producers out there. I've done some public speaking around this. Also in the community banking space, done a lot of speaking and meeting with banks around it. There's a lot of gray hair around a lot of executive tables in banking, and there's a lot of need for transition of operational duties in agriculture. And a lot of the operations, they just don't know where to start. They know they need to do something, but they don't know where to start. And so I think Bank of North Dakota can also step in a stronger way in those industries and help with that evolution as an education and a resource. So overall, core values, mission, and then that vision for the future. So yes, I kind of checked all 3 boxes for myself and said, yes, this is definitely for me.
Great. Thank you. Drew?
So I'd be jumping, the hour goes quickly, so I was gonna ask, obviously at some point you were plucked out of the side there and you were put on a leadership track at your bank over there and at Starion. Tell us about that. What do you think led to that? And just walk us through that course a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that's a little bit striking.
It seemed to naturally occur. When I came in, I kind of always, I think it's my mindset and the way I show up. I've always been a real authentic person, a very just real person. I think I've been described that way. That's just kind of how I operate. And so no matter what role I serve in banking, and the role has always meant less to me than has been, the mission that we have, how are we getting there? What are the people involved? Are we bringing them along? Are the people taken care of? Are the people cared for? Are the customers cared for? And I've just always stayed centered in that. And from my roles in credit and to chief credit, to credit analyst, to market president, to chief financial, it's mattered less about the title. It's just been great people, great mentors, great relationships, and great missions. And so I've just stayed really centered in that. And it's just kind of naturally evolved me up through the leadership track. That hasn't really been sought by me. I've never sought title or something like that. It's just been good missions, good people, good results, and that's just what's resonated.
This is probably a better question for later in the interview. I'm going to ask it now. So going through your materials, and they're great. Your cover letter is a letter that only someone from Wyoming could write. It's succinct, it is direct. There's a political component to this job that is unmistakable. I mean small people, right? I mean, it's a policy wing of North Dakota government. It plays a central role in a lot. And I'm not talking Republican, Democrat. I'm talking about all of it. So your family, I know that your in-laws, they're all really involved in public life. I think maybe we shook hands once. I've met you a time or two only in that. But so you've not been involved in that. So I'm going to ask, are you allergic to that? And do you recognize, and which is fine. I mean, I got a lot of people in my family are allergic to it. Have you thought a lot about how that interplay is going to be? As the president of the Bank of North Dakota, there's interaction with not only, the Industrial Commission, our legislature, other policymakers, what have you. There's a real significant public component. I know there is in your CEO role that's starting to, but shake that out a little bit for us.
Yeah, I think if you'd asked me that question 6-8 years ago, my answer would have been, I'm not ready for that, being very honest. And I think now I am ready for that. And I can also see myself in it. I can picture myself working on a mission and a vision that I believe in and that resonates. And the skills I've learned through my experience have now prepared me and have made me ready for that. And so I think it's just happening at the right moment, at the right time. And I'm excited about it. I am. So to take what I've learned, all of my skill sets, and bring it to bear and evolve, the bank, carry forward the parts of the bank that need to be carried forward and stay true to, but also evolve the parts of the bank and the agency that needs to evolve because the world is evolving. It really is. So.
Well, and the leadership will evolve too. I mean, within the next months, we'll have a new chair of this commission, for one thing, and one of the two major party candidates is likely to be the next governor. So that'll be a change, and every election brings that possibility in the legislature. So there's a lot of that. I guess at its core, it's a banking leadership role, but it also has a very significant public component to it. Yeah, nothing else on that right now, but I want to come back to that a little bit later. Thanks.
I know, Don, you had mentioned some of your leadership roles within that executive team. Can you go back and just give me some timelines there? And if you wanted to expand on that, just in case I might have forgot something that was in your resume.
Sure. Texas is where it really started into a leadership role. As I worked out of special assets and worked with credit, the bank also itself down there was going through, again, some evolution due to growth and some evolution due to the challenges that 08 and 09 brought about. So just kind of naturally through working those issues, working those needs, and just continuing to work with good people, graduated up into a leadership role. And started it there. Then came back. So that was probably about a year, 2 years.
Was that 2004 or 2006 you went down there?
That I believe we went down in 2006.
Okay.
And we would have come back in 2011, I think. Yeah. Then came back, brief stint as just like a senior vice president of credit at Starion. And then with Kirby's move over, then became chief credit officer pretty much right away. Spent roughly 4 years doing that, I believe, and then roughly 2 years as CFO, roughly 2 years as president, and now about 2 years as CEO, roughly. Maybe it's 5 years as CCO, but those are the rough timelines.
Well, we definitely had some different challenges, but we didn't really experience a recession in North Dakota in 2008 and 9.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that experience you're bringing to the table on that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And I guess, not that I wanted to lead into that question, but what do you believe makes you the best candidate for this role as president of Bank of North Dakota?
I think one, like I mentioned before, my experiences, I believe, prepared me for the position. I think there is the post 2020, the world is evolving more rapidly. It's more volatile. It seems to be moving faster, more polarization. And it was occurring prior to 2020, but post 2020, it feels and looks a little different. We're talking a lot in the community banking industry. We have to evolve and evolve fairly rapidly. Bob Walters of CO Network, a good friend and mentor of mine. He brings all the CEOs together of the banks across the nation every spring and fall. He said, you community bank CEOs, if you get involved in fintech, you're 3 years too early. But if you wait 3 years, you're 3 years too late. So you have to move now. And I thought that was profound what he said. It's uncertain, but it's evolving and changing, and that's changing. Not to mention, like I mentioned, the talent management, the generational changes in people. Those types of challenges and needs in the space. Everything in that is going to require strong experience and strong leadership to evolve. Not just the industry, but the partners like Bank of North Dakota, also in the agricultural industry, the business industry. It's changing and changing rapidly. So I think for me, I feel prepared. I think my experience prepares me, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about entering the realm of the more public eye. I'm excited about the possibility of holding on to Bank of North Dakota's story and taking it further. I'm excited about still staying close to my passion, which is helping community banks, farms, ranches, businesses. So for me, it just fits in all three categories.
Any following there, Doug?
No, thank you. That, you expanded on that.
We're going to jump into a category that you have a lot of experience in, that's managing risk. And of course, given the mission of the bank, there are some things that the bank does that is explicitly taking more risk, but then there's many ways that under the current structure, the bank has far less risk because, for example, deposit risk. The bank, doesn't have a marketing department that either, by law or by tradition, a lot of deposits flow in from the state of North Dakota. And there's kind of a commingled treasury function where those dollars go into the bank. So that takes away a lot of risk that you would have to be managing it like Astarion, where you have to keep fighting for deposits. But tell us a little bit about, you've got this deep background in, credit through your history and as CFO and now as CEO, but tell us about how, when you bring that into the bank, how do you see that layering that into a bank that has structurally different than most commercial banks, and how do you think it's important? Because the job that for the three of us is, the biggest fear for our group is that there's, risk that gets taken that is not properly accounted for. And you've got a unique position, having actually been a customer and been in participating loans. We don't usually get to talk to customers as part of industrial commission meetings, but as part of this answer, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective from community banking side and your participation with the bank and observations about how we can make sure in this volatile environment that we're increasing our ability to manage risk.
Yeah. At all times, you got to keep a holistic eye on risk. And that means that enterprise-wide risk in all those categories. And you're right, Doug, there's parts of the bank that, don't function like a traditional private community bank. But there's also, then I think, additional things like the public relationship that is a risk that community bank space doesn't necessarily have. So I think it just shifts that risk. And so I think, we've gotten very good at looking at enterprise-wide risk. There's the credit side, there's the operational, there's the strategic and reputational, there's the compliance and regulatory, and keeping an eye on all those factors. One beautiful thing in banking is you have a plethora of data. Data is everywhere around banking, and a lot of it is public through call reporting and whatnot. So you can keep a holistic eye and a comparison to, okay, well, what's that risk profile doing in the industry? How are we comparing? So to kind of finalize that answer, I would approach Bank of North Dakota like a $10 billion community bank and look at her deposit base and her marketing and other things as, parts of that may not be there, but there's a different risk segment that will be there, and that will be the relationships and the public side of that, the public funding side, and just a different risk profile, but that should still be part of the holistic enterprise-wide risk management system that you're running. And I think the holistic is the key word in that for not just Bank of North Dakota, but for community banking space.
Great, thank you. Drew?
You've mentioned mentors several times, including one that now works for you. Tell us a little bit about how you've reciprocated that. Is there that's a big part. There's a culture at the Bank of North Dakota. And if you're selected as the president, you're going to be called upon to enhance that, of course. Your mark would have to be, tell us a little bit about that. What are some of the cultural components you see in a strong bank, and that some of your mentors and how they've impacted you in that regard?
Yeah, really three areas. I talked core values a little earlier. The second one then is clear vision, clear, open, authentic vision. I've had really good luck with that. If I'm working on a project or at Starion, laying out that clear vision of the future for the entire bank, clarity is a big eliminator of organizational fog. And then the talent management system is a third piece. And within that is coaching, attracting, retaining, career pathing, growth planning. Probably the three most important things, or the three things I'm most proud of in my banking career is three of my executives today. I grew up through the Starion Bank ranks. LaDon, our chief credit officer, grew her up through the credit ranks. Rick Jelloff, our CFO, CO, grew him up through the credit ranks. David Rockstead, our chief banking officer, grew him up through the ranks. And they're doing just wonderful and fantastic, and they're great bank executives, and they're all, late 30s. And so I've just been really, it gives me joy to watch them grow and to watch them succeed. And so that's kind of how I'm wired. I like to be real. I like to be authentic and kind of approach various projects or the need or the entirety of the company with kind of that three-pronged approach. And that's really, it seemed to work for me so far anyway.
Did you select your mentors, or did they sort of select you, do you think, as you kind of went along?
Well, I think I was blessed, like with Dave Huckstra, Mark Cundiff in Texas, Teal Arnold in Texas, those mentors that I have, Kurt Wolf here at Starion, was just blessed to have those people in my life. I don't know how they came about. I was just blessed to have them, learned so much from them. And then it's almost kind of like you got to pass that on, Plus, the other piece to that is, attracting key talent, especially in the banking industry, is not getting easier, it's getting harder. So we have been growing our own as a strategy for many, many years. You just have better luck with that. You just do. The culture you can maintain more clearly and with more continuity. People like a culture that promotes their own. It promotes motivation. It promotes innovation. So I'm just a big believer in growing your own. So for so many reasons, plus just the sheer joy of watching somebody you've coached and mentored come up,
When did you first become, along your banking career, when did you first become aware of the mission of this Bank of North Dakota? It's the only one in the country. So when did you first become aware of that and kind of its nuances and what its benefits were? And what would be your transition? What can you tell us about how you would have to transition out of the private banking industry into the Bank of North Dakota leadership?
So, first became aware early on in my banking career, probably 03, 04. Those first couple of years in banking, you're so green, you're just trying to swim, right? But then finally the pieces kind of come into play and you start to realize, oh, okay. And then just through my career, you watch like the flood came in and there's B&D there helping with the disaster loan program. The drought comes in and they're helping with the disaster loan program. We saved a lot of ag customers with that real estate program that otherwise would have been out of business, when that came about. And so just things like that. And then as you get more into the larger deals is where we really become a customer of Bank of North Dakota is those participations. That's when you really become aware of the value of it. And not just the simple fact that that's a place to put the funds, but I've always viewed Bank of North Dakota as a good partner. Like, hey, here's this credit. Here's what we're thinking on it. Here's how we like to structure it. Here's what we see, good, bad. And, what do you guys think? And it's just that teamwork and that different perspective being brought to it. That tends to make a better decision overall. So that's been my awareness of Bank of North Dakota over time. In terms of my transition, it will be a transition. There's no doubt about it. And I think the first thing with anything is to be real about it, recognize it. It will be different for me. I will have a learning curve. A lot of that excites me. I love new challenges and I feel like I'm prepared for it. But there will be a learning curve to learn the dynamics, to learn the systems, to learn the culture. So with any role that I've taken, and I would expect to be with this one, the first 90 to 100 days is learning the culture, learning the people, learning the relationships, learning the systems, and all at the same time, you're building this, okay, what makes sense, what should, and what needs to evolve, and putting that plan together. And eventually getting that to a point where you put a plan together and then you get the right parties involved and say, hey, here's what we should evolve with the bank. Let's talk about it and put it in place and move on down the road. So, but definitely there will be a transition, but I feel very, very ready for it.
Well, it's easy. You relate very easily. You can see that. And there's a lot of folks that if you're hired as the president of Bank of North Dakota, are going to want to get in your ear about a lot of things or just make that acquaintance. And whether it's people involved in the public policy realm, parties I'm talking about when I say that, or others just around the state. I saw in here that you travel quite a bit with your current role out around the Starion footprint. So
Definitely.
Right.
And hopefully I'll be blessed with another good mentor in that space because that mentor sure helps. So
Yeah.
I'd be open to that as well.
thanks.
Hey, Doug?
So as an underwriter, CFO, worked in multiple divisions and in your professional career, how much of that has been involved with strategies on collection, distressed borrowers? Has there been an extensive background in that area, or just give us a little bit of an overview of that?
Yeah, extensive, very. Really started out in review and special assets work right away with Dave Huckster at BNC. There wasn't a lot to work out of pre-0809 because things were hopping pretty good.
Yeah.
But 0809 really changed a lot. And that's where I really dug in and got a lot with the Texas banking group, working out of those deals, small, mid, large. And it really makes a difference, small, mid, large, how you work out of them, the level of sophistication you need, the system, the overall group of partners that you need, things like that. And then coming into Starion, Starion's always had very clean credit history, strong. But even with that, if you're $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion, $10 billion, you're always going to have a level of distressed credit, special assets to work. And so part of that evolution of Starion's credit function was to evolve a special assets function that could handle varying levels of distressed credit, during the good times, during the moderate times, and during the bad times. And that's what we tried to build and try to manage. So extensive overall, yes.
So do you have a different philosophy with the small, mid, and large creditors, borrowers?
That's the way it ends up usually. It just does. The best thing with the best general approach, but there are always exceptions to the rule, right? But the general approach is work with the borrower and see if the borrower, see what they can do. Now, sometimes they need challenge, sometimes they need support, sometimes they need a consultant, sometimes they need a CFO, sometimes they need capital, but work with that borrower and try to, we say in the special assets world, we should have all got psychology degrees because that's what it ends up being. You're working with that person and partnering with them in a distressed situation. Try to get them to move in a different way, find other solutions. If you exhaust that, then and only then do you move more into the legal world, into the other aspects of that. But that's a lot of what distressed credit work is the psychology piece.
Well, you got that right. In this job, I'm a therapist.
Right.
For everyone.
I always said I wished I'd got a minor in psychology.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your background across, BNC, the Texas Bank, and Starion, about capital planning and the roles you've played. I imagine when CFO, might have been even driving that, or as CEO driving that. But tell us how you think about it structurally and what components are there and what do you look for in good capital plan. And also, you've mentioned a lot about how things change post 2020. How has that changed with both with fintech and just volatility and this interest rate environment we're in, and sort of the importance of capital planning?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I mean, the lifeblood, right? So at Starion, if you're on the executive team, you're part of strategic planning. So I'd have been a part of that starting as chief credit officer. So that'd be the last 10 years of my life. And like you said, Doug, really when I became CFO is then it leapfrogged that forward. Of course, as president and CEO. For me, in my experience, it starts with your risk profile. What risk profile do you have and do you want? And those are two different questions. Which one do you have and which one do you want? And then you can assess, okay, then what capital level from the highest level, the 100,000 foot level, makes the most sense. okay, considering all those factors. And then you've got to go into, okay, what are the possibilities of growth in that capital and what are the risks of deterioration to that capital? And there are many of them. Just the access to capital investors is one, the use of capital and retained earnings and the contribution back and how much is dividend and all those factors, right? But there's also the deterioration of capital of credit loss and risk. So now it kind of merges back into risk. So again, the word that I tend to resonate around is holistic, a holistic approach to it and a real approach to it, starting with what's the risk profile we want, what do we have, where are we at with all those different pieces that I mentioned, plus more, and then are we okay with that? Or do we need to do something different? And then the final piece is let's stress test that. What if scenarios? And I think the stress test is what's really changed after 2020. I think if anything, if you look back prior to 2020, I don't think we have enough imagination. We just didn't imagine what would happen in the next 4 years. So some of our models, some of our stress test models, while good, they were based on the last 20 years history. Well, none of this had occurred in the last 20 years. So now these models are going to have to adjust and the imagination is going to have to open up a little bit on what new unprecedented thing could come about. And let's run and model a scenario for that and see what happens to capital and see what contingency plan we want to put in place. So, and it's ongoing. I don't think it's something you do and set down. We used to, look at it annually. We're doing stress testing and capital planning kind of on a monthly basis now. So it's just more of an ongoing function now, and that's what it's evolved to.
Thank you.
Interesting. You, as you talk about the pace of that, you'll have an interesting challenge, not because we're slow, but because we're not bankers. We're not immersed in that world. So that's something that tell us about your communication with it. I mean, there's the bank advisory board, and then there's the industrial commission, and it's all a very open process. We have open meetings, open communications. Tell us about that. How will you engage us in all of that?
Well, I think, again, part of, if you'd asked me 6 years ago, am I ready? Probably not. My experience in having to engage a board for the last 4 to 5 years, and before that, but just in a different way over the last 4 to 5 years, who is really a non-banking board, and family ownership, that a big part is non-banking. So I've gained good, 4 to 5 years experience here of interacting in that way with its own form of politics, with non-banking groups. And so I think now I would be ready to step into that realm, to interact with a larger body of non-banking folks, because it becomes, education, partnership, patience, thoughtfulness, explanations, and staying true to, I found myself through 2020 and all the different gyrations that were happening of the consistent conversation was, let's stay true to the mission of the bank. It'd be easy to kind of chase this rabbit down a rabbit hole, that rabbit down a rabbit hole. But what's the core mission of the bank? And for Starion, and it's fiduciary responsibility to her depositors, her shareholders, and her customers. And let's stay true to that. That was kind of a rallying cry that we had, is let's just stay true, stay in the fairway, stay solid through all the volatile weather, and have those conversations with those different parties. So
what made you want to be a CPA when this all started off in your educational path? And did you go into it thinking about banking, or did that you just found that?
My first mentor, Dave, was a CPA, and he coached me that a CPA, even if you don't use it in public, just the knowledge and the experience, because in banking you're dealing with so much that a CPA does, and that a financial analyst does, from financials to strategy and everything in between, tax returns and you name it, models and pivot tables and everything. And so he said, if you want to go far in banking, get your CPA. And so I followed his advice and got it. His best advice I've ever got, because it's helped a lot, not just from the powerful initials of it, but also the knowledge that you gain from the ongoing CPE and all of that. It's just been very, very invaluable for me.
Yeah.
Just good advice.
What city did you grow up in Wyoming?
Hewlett, Wyoming.
Where's that?
So right in the northeast corner, so just across the line from Belfast, South Dakota. In fact, my family's ranch was just on the northern edge of the Devil's Tower,
Oh.
National Monument there.
Nice.
So yeah, it's
It's
beautiful.
kind of like saying, where's Minalkin?
Yeah.
Good choice for your family,
Yeah.
not having to grow up in South Dakota, like a second tier state, so.
Right,
That's pretty-
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make sure you guys
Gotta
understand.
come to North
Wyoming.
Dakota. That's right.
What do you believe are the most important ingredients, components, principles? There's things about people in general that you believe would really foster a good culture that would really help with a great success story.
Vision, number one, and simple and clear vision of the key points for, if you're trying to rally 200 human beings around something as complex as where's the bank going, you've got to simplify that down. It can't be narrative. We used to write a 54-page strategic plan and it brought in a consultant to do it and nobody read it. And we put it on the shelf. We actually became an EOS bank when I took over and we went to a 2-page VTO simple vision that paints that clear 5-year picture. And then every quarter we talk about it with the people. So number one is, are you clear about the vision with all your staff about where you're going and open and authentic about that? And the second piece is the people, right people in the right seats who get it and want it and have the capacity to do it. And we're real about that. We moved to an accountability chart. That's more than an org chart. It's actually it doesn't list a title. It lists, here's what your job functions are. Here's what I look you in the eye for that clarity of expectations. And then we have conversations around, do you get this? Do you want it? And do you have the capacity to do it? And, can you see yourself doing that to our core values? The third is your processes and your data, because in banking, business, agriculture, processes and data affect everybody from the customer to your staff. If you have bad processes and data, it can kill a culture. You need good processes and data that line up with your vision. Banks are notorious for having a book full of SOPs, standard operating procedures, but we've missed that 30,000-foot level to say, are our procedures lined up to deliver the type of experience we want to deliver to that customer or to the other department? And so we've been doing a lot of work at that 30,000. It's called core way work, doing that type of stuff. And so those are pieces that we've been putting into place in order to move that forward. It's been a great system for us. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it resonates with me because the concepts make sense. That simplification of the complex, that focusing on the people and that talent management process, and focus on your data and your processes, and then it goes on into financials and ultimately to a traction organization. So it's a good system we found to use, but it's just the concepts that I believe in trying to convey there.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments earlier, and I agree with you that I think that with the bank in North Dakota, we have less concentration of community banks than other states. I know that, just from the data, but also talking to other governors that they wish that they had what we had, especially during times of distress. We've got a mechanism to support those community banks, and you say very clearly by through those community banks, then we're supporting farmers, ranchers, and local small businesses. I'm sure you've been involved in your presidency role in banking associations. You probably know most of the bankers in the state that would now have been your either peers or competitors, but now they would be in some ways as participating, will be customers. Tell us a little bit about your experience as a customer of B&D and how, if you're in this role, how you would use that experience to serve the other community banks.
Yeah, I kind of go to that concept of, carry forward the great things that should be carried forward and then evolve those things that need to evolve. Just top of mind, the first thing Bank North Dakota does great working with partner banks is anytime they're rolling out something new, they always call for input. They'll call a meeting and ask us bankers across the state, hey, join this call, give us input. And we all have relationships. I have relationships with Kirby and Kaylin and Craig, and we're kind of always talking in the industry. And so but you get asked. So that's a beautiful thing, I think, to carry forward is continue to ask the industries, what do you need? What is going on out there? There's a tremendous amount of knowledge at that grassroots level to keep learning from. And so that'd be just one of carrying forward, but some that can evolve, that succession piece. I talk to a lot of bankers and a lot of ag operators, and they know they need to succeed. They know they need to turn it over, but they don't know where to start. It's not a fun topic for them to talk about, but they just don't know where to start. And I think a part that can evolve is Bank of North Dakota can help those industries with connecting to the right partners that can help them quarterback those conversations, education, just those type of things that could evolve and help those industries with those biggest needs. The two biggest needs I see are fintech and digital transformation and talent management. If we figure those two out for the next 10 years, I think we'll have done very, very well.
Tell us more about sort of your, what your concerns, you think that both your concerns and what you think the opportunities are on fintech.
Oh, I think the opportunities are tremendous. The concern is the risk of getting there and how we do that. And I think why the opportunity is tremendous because customers are moving that way. I've got two sons, one in college, one's a senior in high school. They've got little businesses, savings accounts, they've moved states. Their dad works at a bank. They never step foot in a bar bank to open their accounts or to do their business. It's all through text. And so that's just where it's going because that's where the customer is going. And so that evolution, the tremendous opportunity there is you can expand your geographical footprint. You no longer have to go with as much brick or mortar, now opened up channeling opportunities to expand reach. Plus just the ability to expand services. I mean, you go 25 years ago, you can only interact by coming in person to your banker or calling them on the phone. And now you got chat, you got websites, you got mobile apps, you got video ITMs, you got third-party event. I mean, it's just that complexity, but you can offer more and more financial services. And so a lot of the fintechs are coming out with budgeting apps for consumers. They're coming out with invoicing apps for small business. My wife runs a small business. One of the things she hates about it is invoicing, and she's not good at it. So an app to do that is a beautiful thing. So how does the banking industry marry up with that industry, with that creativity? An industry that speaks fintech, an industry that speaks banking, and very few that speak both, and it's a different language. There's going to have to be a marrying up of that, and I think the opportunity is great, but I think the risk of that, there's a language barrier, and there's also the regulatory risk, and there's also just the operational financial risk, because out of 48,000 fintechs, 10,000 won't survive. It's a startup venture capital space, so it needs to be thoughtful, and I think the banks can show up as the adults in the room for the next 10 years, and I think really bring some legitimacy to a lot of the space.
Doug, I think we're back to you.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about a mentor. You also talked about mentors in general, handful that you have. If you were to ask them, what do you believe they would tell you you need to work on or continue to work on to develop professionally and as a leader?
They would say they like my openness and authenticness, not a word, authenticity, sorry, but don't overuse that strength. Sometimes you're too transparent. Sometimes you overshare. Sometimes you're too blunt. You could say something in a less blunt way. Some of those things I've learned over the last 4 years, but honestly, it's one of my growing edges is I like to be open and transparent and just have a good, open, robust conversation. But as you get up into these levels, and especially as you transition into where there's, more openness, public, that, you've got to learn, build that muscle of saying things at the right level, right? The right level of detail, the right level of, so that's something I'm working on. That'd be probably the number one they'd say I need to continue to grow into.
God, that's my problem.
It's real, but it's good to identify. I mean, I can listen to that and say I suffer the same. I mean, but it's not that hard to dial it the other way. It's hard to get people who are closed to be more open. It is something to be aware of, and especially in the this is a very high profile role, the Bank of North Dakota. A lot of high profile things going through there, and you don't seem to shy away from that at all. That's obvious, but you recognize too that it's not quite like being ahead of the Fed, but things that you say can send this place spiraling.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, be thoughtful and
Yeah,
I try to resonate around that. Be thoughtful. That helps me a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Something I read about Starion is you offer insurance services, or what specifically? And I know it's a little off from this, but I have a little bit of background on that. So I was just wondering, what is the bank doing with insurance?
Yeah, we offer property insurance,
Okay,
auto
property
insurance.
casualty?
Yeah, property casualty, and we're just now, we have been offering crop, but we're expanding that to all of our ag bank. We want all of our ag bankers out there offering crop
Oh,
insurance
okay.
as well to ag producers, so.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
I got a couple of quick ones and go back on the customer one. We're, as a participating bank, when would you and the team, the credit team, or you as president or CEO the last few years decide, hey, here's something we want to bring to the Bank of North Dakota as a partner, or hey, we're going to do it on our own, or we're going to pass on it? I mean, tell me a little bit about the process of again, from that customer lens. And how does it work? How is it working with the Bank of North Dakota? And how is that experience as a customer going to shape you if you're in this position?
Yeah, it's really, so there, the most primary use is we got a deal that's in over our whole limit. Our legal lending limit's, I think, 25 million. We like to hold about 10, on those deals. And so anything over that, we'll look for participants. And we always go to Bank of North Dakota first, just because we have those relationships and we can have a quick conversation and really kind of get a sense of, yes, this is doable or not. And because we like that long-term partnership, we always try to send Bank of North Dakota the good deals, right? There are sometimes you end up participating in a deal because it's got some additional risk and you want to share in that risk with another financial institution. We try not to send those Bank of North Dakota's way because we want that long-term, solid. But there's also been a partnership with Bank of North Dakota, not only on the credits, but I think we just moved our banking services to Bank of North Dakota away from Wells, because Wells is pulling back regionally out of the area. We've all seen that. And then some of our on-book credits, if we have some liquidity needs, if we've got some capital management that we're doing, we might, visit with Bank of North Dakota about some on-book deals that we might want to sell to them. So, but the primary one is a deal comes in, it's too large for us. We otherwise would not be able to do it, but we can now because we have the Bank of North Dakota. So that's really the primary value, even though it's so much more than that, but that's just what is the main day-to-day kind of staple, the bread and butter.
If you go back to 2001 and the dot-com crash, the federal government started laying a much heavier hand on regulation. Then we had the real estate crash, which you had direct experience in down in Texas. Then they came in with some other stuff and they started, I think, a whole regime that was favoring large banks against small banks, the whole too big to fail thing. And we're going to, build walled gardens around the big guys. And then the little guys, we're going to, drive up the requirements on you. The Bank of North Dakota is insulated from some of that as a state agency and doesn't have to deal with some of that regulatory thing. But tell us a little bit about Starion's, your relationship with regulators, the regulatory environment, and also specifically, I know you're regulated by the Department of Financial Institutions, but tell us a little bit about your relationship with that agency.
Always been viewed as a strong partnership. We view their examiners coming in as, yes, look under the hood and find where we can evolve, where we can improve what we may be missing, and let's work to correct it, all in the interest of let's make the bank better. So that's been a really good relationship with the regulators. You're right, though, that overall in the larger picture, that consolidation is happening in the small banks. And I think there's been some token thrown that way of let's give the small banks a break on the Basel III. Let's give the small banks a break on some of the capital requirements we're requiring of big banks. But it could be more if you really wanted to help slow down the consolidation going on in that space, because the margins are thinner for small banks and the regulation the cost continues to increase on them. And that's, and then you throw in some talent management succession needs, and pretty soon that, you understand why smaller community banks are being sold and being bought. So, yeah. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Doug or Drew, any other questions?
No, those are the questions that I had. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the conversation.
I wanted to follow up just a little bit. It kind of switches gears though, and what the governor had asked. If the Bank of North Dakota didn't exist you as community banks or any of the banks out there, if you hit your legal lending limits, you're almost forced to find someone else to partner with. And in that situation, that might put you in a partnership with a competitor who then would start cherry picking your business.
That can happen, yes. Not supposed to, but yes, it can and does
Yeah,
happen.
yeah, I
yes.
mean, it's kind of just nature of the business. So I'm just thinking about it, and I'm probably thinking more out loud, but the Bank of North Dakota does help maintain autonomy out there in the financial world.
Yes, in a big way. Yes. We would not have grown like we've grown at Starion without
Without
Bank
the
of North
bank.
Dakota. That's easy to say. Absolutely.
It's more of a comment
Yep,
than anything else, but yeah, I was just thinking through this more often.
Don,
No, thank you.
we're at the close of our hour. Is there any closing thoughts or comments you'd like to leave the commission with in terms of your sort of, passion, interest, view of this role going forward? I mean, you obviously made a big decision as a sitting CEO to throw your name into a public process. We appreciate your doing that. Again, congratulations on being one of the 2 finalists, but give us your closing thoughts.
Again, just want to thank members of the Industrial Commission. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the opportunity. Like I said, it's an honor and a privilege to sit here and interview with you and just kind of talk banking and talk leadership and talk all things that way. I'm the type of guy, what you see is what you get. I'm authentic, I'm real. I think I've learned a lot, but I'm also humble to know that I've got a lot more to learn. I view this as the next great step for me. I'm excited about the challenge. I can see the vision that I would bring and just excited for the opportunity. So thank you for your time. And again, Karen, thank you. Great process you put together, moving all the difficult parts. So thank you very much. So just thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great to see you.
All right. Okay, we take a recess for a couple of minutes. And then we'll,
10 minutes?
10 minutes works, and then we'll meet. Why don't we just say 12:15 when we meet back here?
Yeah,
12:15.
that'd be great.
So, okay, well, first of all, I want to, on behalf of the commission members, I also want to thank Karen and the team and all the delegates from our offices and the advisory board members and others for running a really good process. It's just first of all, it's fantastic that we were able to market this, have a search firm, get 130 applicants, and then have the opportunity this morning to meet two qualified finalists. That's, I know that around all of us are trying to fill positions. All of us, there's a lot of competition for talent these days. We've had to, whether it's filling cabinet positions or other leadership positions. We don't always have strong of a finalist pool as this, and that's we see that across lots of places. So a good spot to be in. I'll kick it off and then want to have open discussion. But I would just say in terms of the process, in terms of where we're beginning with the end in mind, Karen has a draft motion that does not include the candidate name, but the draft motion that we'd end up with at the end would be one where we would instruct Karen on behalf of the Industrial Commission to, enter into a discussion about an employment agreement. And that employment agreement would include the salary discussion, because our, two candidates have varying degrees of comp. Obviously, the sitting CEO has got a higher degree of comp than what the other candidate, who's a member of the bank leadership team but not a CEO. But we've got the final salary will be public. But I think, and it was public what was shared on the range for the applications, but what was publicly shared before on the range for salary?
The numbers?
Was it publicly
It
shared?
was publicly shared.
And what was the range?
And the range was 350 to 450.
Okay, so there's a fair range there based on experience and where people are, but that's the window, and Calvin is well below that range. Don is in that range. I think that, with delegated authority, Karen will be able to take care of that. So I don't think we have to have a lengthy discussion on comp. She'll use all the comps and the comparables and where they're starting from today, relative to manage all that. So we just need, if we another outcome, one outcome we would make that motion, we delegate it, she goes and pursues that. And another might be if somebody feels like, hey, I didn't have enough information from this process, we could defer, but at least where I'm sitting, this has been a thorough thing. I think we've got enough information to make a decision today. And then in terms of the timing of that, we've also prepared press releases for both of the finalists. And then that would be something that could be initiated on behalf of the Industrial Commission, on behalf of the three of us, that we would announce that. And in that, it would just say, and we've delegated the authority to finalize the agreement, but an offer's been made. And we can talk about the timing of that, but I wanted those folks to know that we've worked with Karen to make sure we have a framework for a press release regardless of either candidate. So that's just some of the process operation stuff.
Appreciate that.
Any questions on the process side?
No, I agree with the process of what we're talking about doing here. So Karen's certainly competent enough to do that and carry that out, knowing the level of both of our candidates, where they're at, and how we may have to approach it. So I'm good with that.
Okay. I'll kick off the discussion here, and then I would invite comments from fellow commissioners. But I think as we look at this, it's and I know both of you have had experience in filling senior roles and making leadership decisions before, but we have a little bit of a classic case here in our search committee. Part of it was a good search. And when you end up with a search, it's great when you've got the best internal candidate and the best external candidate. And that's certainly two differences that we've got here between two excellent candidates. And I think part of it then is we have to decide where are we in the history of the organization in terms of the next phase we're going through. Do we need, the traditional thing is, do you go with the internal, do you go with the external? It's a little bit a framework for change and where you're going. The other thing, which is we know that we're facing it's going to be really interesting credit environment because of this explosion in interest. We have the highest interest rates we've had in 40 years. It's just a different thing than we've had in a long time. And we've seen that in some of the meetings we've had recently with the credit stresses that are coming across. We've got one candidate who's, super strong externally on economic development, that's a core mission of the bank with the legislative directed pieces. And then we got another candidate who's sort of, as you said in the first sentence, grown up on the credit and risk management side. And then lastly, if there's another third distinction, we've got one candidate who's run a bank successfully, and in that bank has not just run one, but he's run one in our state and's got experience on the customer side. We've got someone else who's got 8 years of great experience inside the bank as we've gone through. Both of them have experienced some of the challenges that we've gone through with the Great Recession that was, followed the pandemic. So they've got sort of recent experience, but those are some broad contrasts. And I would, love to have a discussion, but to start it off, I would say we got another thing which we don't usually get when we have kind of thing is there is an option here where you could end up with both of them, because if you ended up with the external CEO candidate with the credit, risk depth of experience and customer experience, it's not foregone that we might not be in a position to retain the other candidate as a part of that leadership team. Obviously, that's going to be up to the new CEO, but I think there is. I'm just pointing out, you don't always get a chance to pull a both option, but one of these choices gives us a shot at having both of them as part of that leadership team. And they do represent different strengths and weaknesses that are complementary to each other because of the very different paths they've taken to get to this spot today. So I'll just stop there and then open it up to hear comments from the fellow commissioners.
Well, I'd make a comment about both candidates. I think, to your point, Governor, they both have some experience in some areas that certainly support what we want to do within the bank. I appreciate that they were willing to even step forward and go through this process. It's a bit daunting and challenging in itself. There's certainly clear distinctions between the both, and that's probably going to weigh heavily on where I'm leaning, watching what we went through in this environment over the last 15 years. But I think to that point, we see some unique challenges going forward. They've always been challenges, but now we're just in a different environment. So I just want to say thank you again and express the same sentiments you did. I appreciate all the work that went into this, Karen, and everybody that was involved. We have quite a few of these to do in the coming future. So the fact that we started off here, I think really sets a good tone for the trust we can have in the process. And thank you for that.
Yeah, I sure echo that and add one component to it. Thanks to our executive director leading that process and our designees, all of us that we had on there, because as you mentioned, there was a very large number of applicants that came in. We appreciate that you didn't just kick the can down the road and say, here are 5, you guys interview them and see what you can do. You did a really nice job, and the governor articulated that strong internal, strong external, and both really well prepared to come in here today. And the compliments to them and whoever that helped them prepare to come in. They did a really nice job. I really feel like we got good answers to the information we were seeking. Appreciate that, and also the preparation materials that we had to go through. They were very solid also. So thanks for all of that, and just thanks to my co-commissioners too for these processes. We all just tend to focus on different things, it seems, and it's nice to get through an interview. Like an hour is a pretty quick time, but I feel like we fleshed it out pretty well. So really, thanks to everybody.
I agree with that. I guess and this is a little awkward. Never, ever have been in a situation like this, because most of our hires are done in a manner in which you have the ability to vet things out in a more confidential manner.
Thanks.
But given that this is public in the way it's done, I am going to say I appreciated the search firm's comments, because they provided some insight and their opinion and overview of the candidates, and they were both good recommendations. I think clearly there was something that they pointed out, and it goes back to probably the banking experience. And I guess for myself, leaning on the credit analysis side of it could really bring more strength to our bank and our situation. I could probably say more, but maybe, and the experience, the banking experience in general, of even running a bank and overseeing 16 branch banks, really, I think lends itself to probably at least creating that foundation for being the bank president. With that being said, I would move Don Morgan as the bank, next president of the Bank of North Dakota.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a second.
And just to add only that, as we go through, and we'll be discussing this as we go along, but with the recognition of something the governor also said about both have such strong components and could, with that process going forward, if Don were to be selected here today, you've got, strong pieces in place and a new leader coming in with the strengths that you both have spoken to and to which you both have immense experience. I don't, and I appreciate your questioning along those lines and gaining that insight for me as somebody who doesn't come from that background. So thanks. I second that motion and with the hope that, if we get to that point and he's offered this position that, our other applicant, Mr. Holland, that would recognize that we have great regard for the job, the role that he plays at the bank, and hopefully that will continue going forward.
Absolutely, I agree. Calvin brings another component to our bank that we need because of the way in which we interact with communities and economic development. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that on Calvin and with the number of large economic development projects going on, and he's been a key partner in working with the Ag Department, the Commerce Department on all of these things, and so he's been instrumental on the economic development side. But I also concur with the motion that we have an opportunity, perhaps unique, to have someone who's a sitting CEO with 24 years of experience, and most of that on the credit side. What we're facing, again, that just goes back to the search firm. But I do want to say to both of them too, as Doug was referencing, there's a lot of positions which you can apply for in government where you don't have to interview in open meetings and then be discussed in open meetings.
Yeah.
And I know that there are good candidates out there that did not apply to this process
Yes.
because they didn't care to or didn't have the courage to sit through this process. And this is something we changed in higher ed. Higher ed, it used to be if you proposed your name to be a university president, it was public just the minute you put your name out there.
Yeah.
And when we were, decades ago, this was a problem back when I was in the private sector, and we'd post for NDSU or UND, and both of those were like UND there's 10,000 universities or schools of higher ed, private and public in America. There's only like 130 that have a law school and a med school and over, 13,000 students. There's only 100, that have that. There's 10,000 sitting presidents, and we post the job and we get like 10 applicants. And then none of them would be sitting presidents. You'd be like, well, there's something wrong here. It's not just the weather in Grand Forks. I mean, if we had a process about the transparency was keeping people away. We did get that law changed to where now you can apply and then you get a choice. They'll tell you, are you one of 3 finalists? Then you can decide at that point whether you're in or out. And that improved the quality of that pool. And I think, we had 130 applicants, but there was, some people in that pool that were not qualified to run this thing. We ended up with 2 good candidates.
Yeah, we lucked out.
Yeah,
The two we end up with.
Yeah.
For the reasons that have been articulated. But they both had to do, I'm sure, that check before they.
Yeah, they had to have the courage to stand up and go through this process. So it's again, credit to those 2 candidates for bringing it all the way to them being here today. So I'm grateful for both of them. And sure. But back to the motion, we had a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
One additional thing I would add, and this, I put this on the scale in favor of Mr. Morgan as well. We started this discussion several times in the last year or so, talking about the establishment of the curbs that are required for a thriving bank going forward, even with the interplay of the legislative process, because you can't, people come in and they're just like, oh, I've got this great idea for a line of credit and all of these great things going on, the cash management study that the governor's been, really passionate about, and all that coming to play. I feel like Don is in an excellent position to help us guide that process with industry standards that, yeah, some things are different about, a lot of things are different about Bank of North Dakota, but it strikes me again as somebody, I don't have a banking background, but coming into it, I'm sure gonna be looking to, I want to have that discussion. I want to have that discussion with our legislative leadership and the people in the legislature that drive these matters. And I think his background is going to be really, really helpful in that regard as well.
And I want to just say, along those lines, it was just 8 years ago when Eric Hardmeyer brought in Todd Steinwand, who had a career in banking externally, and brought him in. And so I think the idea that we're injecting people with experience in the North Dakota banking system who've worked on the private side, who have experience working with the bank, that has served us well in the past, and created a leadership path for Todd to be in there. And I think that's that continuing to B&D people going to the private sector coming to B&D, that's a good mix back and forth. And this keeps that tradition going. So agreeing with both of you.
Hovind did okay when he was here too.
He did, but he used it as a stepping stone, right?
It was clearly a pass through.
That's right. When he took that job, did he say, I want to be a senator? or something?
I know. Well, never mind.
No, but there's an example again. I mean,
Yeah.
John had his excellent private
Right.
banking
Yeah.
experience, and he had he stepped into that role.
Yeah.
And as an interesting side note, I had a chance to work with him as a customer.
You what's that?
We were a customer.
Oh.
We were.
Is that right?
Yeah. John came and visited us, or when he was the bank president.
Huh?
Like, what is software? That was kind of
He still asks that question.
Well, they were very supportive when he was
Sure.
in the bank, so which is great. Okay, any other questions or comments?
I'll wait for my other comment afterwards.
Okay, all right. Karen, do you want to, or maybe you can hand me, or I'll just make.
Yeah.
Okay, what the motion is, again, that's been moved and seconded, Industrial Commission will offer Don Morgan the position of Bank of North Dakota President and CEO with a start date no later than August 1, 2024. Authorize Industrial Commission Executive Director to negotiate and initiate an employment agreement with Mr. Morgan. We're all clear that that's what. Okay, if there's no other discussion or questions, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes, motion carries.
If I could piggyback on a more recent comments concerning this open type of environment to get people to apply or to even be involved in the process. We have other positions that are coming open in the future, some that are already open. Out in the private sector, there has been people that are definitely competent enough to come and apply for these jobs and do them. And they said they love their company, they love where they're at, they may be looking for new challenges, other opportunities. But they said if their name was to be publicized, it would look like they were being disloyal.
Yeah.
And they said it would not go over well. They would probably stop any movement within the system that they'd be seeking. And in some cases, at some point, they might even be looking for another job. But I think to your point, this is a bit of a problem because there are great people out there that are never afforded the opportunity because of the way we're structured. And if we want to serve the people of North Dakota the best we can, we should be able to invite everybody to the table so we have a good selection of candidates like we did today. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I think we sort of, like I say, lucked out here in that, because people do self-select out sometimes. We ended up with two extraordinary candidates who I sense all three of us would have been extremely comfortable going with either. That there's a little luck. Also, the process was great. I'm guessing though that they had to go through quite a thought process with their families and everyone else because it's taking a risk. There's no shame in seeking a job and it not working out, but sometimes things can be unforgiving at a public level. And I applaud them both for going forward on that, but then also recognizing that the public is served by openness. We all agree to that, but also as to the example the governor gives of the presidents, the public's served also with creating the largest pool possible. And then at some point, it now becomes a matter of public concern, who are the finalists or whatever, or what that process would be. It's a tension. And it's not about wanting to hide what we do, just the opposite. Nothing that we do is hidden. It's serving the public interest of getting the most people applying. And I'll end with where I know we all are. I mean, we are offering this job to a person I believe is going to be an extraordinary president of the Bank of North Dakota. I'm super excited. I know we all are. And then, going forward, sometimes even in our, we're hiring a new younger lawyer or somebody's coming in. A lot of times they'll tell us, I can't tell my firm that I'm doing that. If you guys don't offer me this job in the end,
right.
I'm going to be off the partnership track or what have you. So anyway, that's a broader discussion, but I know we're all excited about Mr. Morgan, to whom we're offering the job of the presidency of the Bank of North Dakota, and looking forward to going forward with him.
And he recognizes, because he said several times that the big challenges going forward, one of them was talent management, which includes talent attraction, which includes the whole hiring and attraction process. Could we also, I would ask, based on the comments that made by the fellow commissioners, myself, that we would have the minutes reflect our respect for both candidates and their willingness and courage to come forward and be part of this very open process.
And they're both in the middle of great careers, and it's exciting that it looks like we'll have them both at the Bank of North Dakota.
Well, we would,
That'd be great.
we would, as I said at the outset, there's the possibility for the outcome where today we don't just pick one, we get both.
Right.
And that Kelvin with 8 years of experience he can keep adding on to that, continuing to contribute at the high level that he is.
I know somebody who got elected governor saying that one time.
Is there any other business, on that note, is there any other business, I don't know who you're talking about, but I don't know, was there any other business, maybe it was Jack County. Is there any other, he had a great lieutenant governor.
That's the word on the street.
Is there any other business before the commission?
No other business, Governor.
If they're not, then to all, have a safe and happy 4th of July.
Yeah,
Okay.
enjoy.
Yeah.
Thank you.